By rung 4 of Antiquities looting, half the people in this trade are dead, doing time, or feeding prosecutors. You call it treasure hunting when you start. The file calls it conspiracy, trafficking, and cultural loss measured in graves opened and history stripped. Look, this ladder is not archaeology, collecting, or licensed excavation. It is the shadow market around torn sites, forged paperwork, and respectable buyers who prefer soft language. 5 rungs: entry, lieutenant, operator, middle management, top. Year 5 is the question on every step. Your outcomes stay narrow all the way up. Death, prison, exit, promotion. Promotion gets the screen time, so people overrate it. Most rung 1 people end in local custody or go home broke. At the top, prison stretches longer, exit gets expensive, and death arrives quieter than the movies. You think you're finding history. You're really a shovel with a pulse. Pay runs about $200 to $2,000 a week, usually seasonal. Your lifestyle is cash today, empty tomorrow. You are visible, replaceable, and deniable to everyone above you. The typical person here is young or desperate, sometimes a farmer, sometimes an unemployed kid, sometimes a war zone survivor digging because wages collapsed. Risk is immediate: trespass, theft, assault, militia attention. A cave-in or a landmine in places where fronts moved back and forth. One court-documented story. In the Middle East and North Africa, prosecutors and investigators tied low-level diggers to material moving out of conflict zones, including funerary objects and tablets ripped from sites under armed group control. The digger saw a few notes. The site lost context forever. Family year 5 loses income, transport money, and often a father to prison or a grave. Typical sentence when caught locally, months to 3 years. Body count on this rung is low by intent, higher by terrain, and armed interference. At rung 2, you think you're a crew leader. You're really an exposure surface with a phone. Pay climbs to roughly $5,000 to $20,000 a month if you can source consistently. Lifestyle changes first in small ways: burner numbers, motel receipts, nervous meals. People checking mirrors. The typical person is 22 to 30, already known to police or customs in some small way, and trusted by somebody above because they kept quiet once. Your risks widen. The first wiretap, the first informant, the first kid below you who gets grabbed and trades your name for leniency. A court-documented example sits in the Hobby Lobby cuneiform case. Thousands of Iraqi artifacts were bought through dealers using misleading invoices and vague provenance language before federal seizure and settlement. The lieutenant rung in deals like that is the coordinator arranging contacts and paper. Sentence exposure varies, but conspiracy and smuggling counts can turn into 2 to 7 years. Victim cost stays the same every time: looted sites, broken archives, and communities watching their dead sold back to them in catalogs. At rung 3, you think you're in the art business. The truth is you're running a laundering machine for objects. Pay lands around $50,000 to $200,000 a month in active periods. Now the front business appears: gallery, restoration room, shipping company, consultant office. Private collection advisory. The typical person is 30 to 45 and insulated from dirt by 2 or 3 human layers. Family often knows money arrived, not specifics. Risk shifts upward: federal indictment, conspiracy, fraud, customs violations, sometimes money laundering. Lawyers go on retainer because year 5 starts showing up early at this rung. One wild documented story: New York dealer Frederick Schultz was convicted in the United States over conspiring to receive Egyptian antiquities stolen from a national patrimony system, using false provenance through a restorer network. The object looked cleaner each time it changed hands. The prison term was about 33 months. His family lost reputation, assets spent on defense in years to a case that outlived the sale itself. Body count here is still usually low in direct killings, but every shipment carries a silent count of smashed tombs, cut mummies, and erased site records. By rung 4, the math doesn't work anymore. You sit between source countries, dealers, shippers, restorers, shell companies, and buyers with clean walls. Pay moves to roughly $500,000 to $5 million a year. Lifestyle means property and other names, private schools, offshore accounts, and dinner reservations made through assistants. The typical person is 35 to 55, too deep to walk away easily, too exposed to feel safe. Your risk is broad and patient. Multi-jurisdiction investigations, mutual legal assistance requests, tax exposure, asset seizure, co-defendants you have never met, deciding your future in another courtroom. A court-documented story with real scale sits around Subhash Kapoor, convicted in India and charged in the United States in a long-running antiquities trafficking scheme tied to stolen idols and museum-grade objects. Investigators say material passed through galleries and false histories into major institutions. This rung pays in 7 figures on paper. Then lawyers, storage, seizures, and freezes start eating it back. Typical sentence length when the cases land can reach a decade or more, sometimes much more. Social standing, travel freedom, and the pretense that the business was respectable. At rung 5, you stop touching dirt and start managing silence. The principal in this trade does not look adventurous. The principal looks tired. Career take can range from $20 million to far more. But liquidity is the problem because wealth trapped in suspect objects is wealth you cannot spend safely. Lifestyle is gated, watched, and solitary. You live with couriers, lawyers, whisper networks, and the knowledge that one photograph from 15 years ago can reopen the whole file. The typical person is over 40 and has spent years turning stolen context into donor-class inventory. Risks narrow hard at the top. Death comes through rivals, war, or the stress damage of living under permanent pressure. Prison means near life in some jurisdictions, once conspiracy, fraud, tax, and trafficking counts stack. Exit means cooperation, exile, or a quiet foreign retirement where your name cannot open many doors. A useful documented example is Giacomo Medici, convicted in Italy in a major antiquities trafficking case built partly on warehouse photographs, records, and objects tied to looted material moving through the international market. That case mapped the top rung the way accountants map leakage. Sentence length was years, assets were seized, and museums had to return objects that had already been treated like permanent cultural furniture. Family losses here are not dramatic on camera. They are slow. Houses sold, names burned, children answering for invoices they never wrote. Typical body count remains lower than narcotics or arms, but there is always collateral violence around digs, border routes, and conflict zones. What years on this ladder teach you is plain. The operator-to-victim ratio is obscene. One seller can profit while a cemetery, temple, or archive loses 1,000 pieces of meaning at once. Year 5 still resolves the same 4 ways. Death, prison, exit, promotion. Promotion is the least common and the most advertised. Even the top-rung salary is partly fantasy once seizures, storage, legal fees, and security start billing the myth. Climb carefully. Every rung pays. And every rung charges. Most rungs end somewhere you wouldn't visit on purpose. Which rung is just a worse version of a legal job you've had?